Trevor didn't just stop the wedding. He nuked it. He didn't say a word as he reached out and grabbed Ilara's left hand. He pulled so hard her shoulder wrenched. The diamond ring, a symbol of 3 years of lies, was ripped from her finger. Ilara gasped, the physical pain sharp, but the shock was paralyzing. "I'm done playing house, Ilara," Trevor snapped. He didn't whisper. He stepped toward the microphone on the priest's podium, the feedback screeching through the cathedral like a dying bird. "Listen up. There is no wedding. The Vance family is broke. They're losers. I'm not tying my future to a girl whose father is a walking debt trap." The silence in the room broke into 1,000 whispers. Ilara felt the heat of 300 cameras rising. Her father, usually a man of steel, was staring at his shoes. He didn't defend her. He didn't move. The betrayal was a double-edged blade. One side was the man she loved, the other was the father she trusted. Both were cutting her open in front of everyone. "Trevor, please," Ilara whispered, her voice cracking. "Not like this. We can talk." "Talk." Trevor laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. "My lawyers did the talking this morning. Your accounts are empty, Ilara. You're not a bride. You're a liability." He turned and marched down the aisle, his groomsmen following like a pack of retreating dogs. Ilara's legs gave out. She didn't fall to her knees, she collapsed into herself, the heavy silk of her dress pooling around her like a white bloodstain. She looked toward the back of the church, her vision blurred by tears she refused to let fall. That's when she saw him. A man stood in the doorway, blocking the sunlight. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a black wool coat that looked more expensive than the entire cathedral. While everyone else was whispering and filming the disaster, this man was still. He was a predator watching a tragedy. Kalen, Trevor's best man and cousin, tried to push past the stranger to follow Trevor out. The man didn't move. He simply looked at Kalen, and the boy stopped dead. Kalen's face went from smug to terrified in a heartbeat. He knew that face. Everyone who dealt in the grey markets of the city knew that face. It was Kongjun Seol, the man they called the architect of Seoul. The man who didn't buy companies. He erased them. Kongjun walked past Kalen as if he were a piece of trash on the sidewalk. His boots clicked against the marble, a slow, rhythmic sound that silenced the room. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the priest. He walked straight to the altar, stepped over the discarded microphone, and looked down at Ilara. "Stand up," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command that forced the air back into her lungs. Ilara looked up, her face a mask of ruin. "Who are you?" "The man who is going to make them regret today," Kongjun said. He turned to the congregation, his voice carrying to the rafters without effort. "The groom has forfeited his place. I will marry her instead." The groom's father, sitting in the third row, stood up, his face turning a ghostly, sickly white. He knew what this meant. If Kongjun Seol married into the Vance family, the debt didn't disappear, it became a weapon. The priest dropped his Bible. The thud echoed like a gunshot. "This is impossible," he stammered, his eyes darting between Kongjun Seol and the retreating back of Trevor. "There are protocols. Licenses. You can't just replace a groom." Kongjun didn't blink. He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored vellum. He didn't hand it to the priest, he dropped it onto the altar. "Read the bottom line," Kongjun said. His voice was like grinding stones. The priest leaned forward, his spectacles slipping down his nose. His face went pale. At the bottom of the page was the seal of the High Court and a signature that made the priest's hands begin to shake. It's a special mandate," the priest whispered to the front pews. "It's already signed by the magistrate. Everything is legal." Ilara stared at the paper, then at the man standing over her. "You had this ready?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and confusion. "How? I've never met you. You knew Trevor would leave." Kongjun looked down at her. He didn't offer a hand to help her up. He waited for her to find her own strength. I didn't know he would leave, Kong Jun said quietly. I knew he was a coward. Cowards always run when the fire gets too hot. I just brought the matches. Behind them, Trevor had stopped at the heavy oak doors. He had heard the announcement. He turned back, his face a twisted mask of greed and indignation. Seeing another man, especially a man like Kong Jun, taking his place at the altar of the wealthiest family in the state sparked a pathetic fire in him. He marched back down the aisle, shoving guests aside. You can't do this, Trevor yelled, his voice cracking. Ilara is mine. That contract is a fake. I'm the one who's supposed to be there. Kong Jun turned slowly. The movement was so fluid it looked lethal. As Trevor reached the foot of the altar, Kong Jun took one step down. He didn't raise his fists. He just stood there. The height difference was intimidating, but the difference in weight was crushing. Trevor stopped 3 feet away, his chest heaving. You threw the ring, Kong Jun reminded him. Every word was a needle. You told this woman she was a liability. You told this room she was worthless. You ended the contract. I am simply picking up the scrap you threw away. I'll sue you, Trevor screamed, looking around for support from his groomsmen. None of them moved. They were staring at Kong Jun's beltline, where the slight bulge of a concealed holster was visible under his coat. You'll sue me with what money? Kong Jun asked. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that the microphone still caught. Your father's hedge fund was liquidated 3 minutes ago. You aren't a groom, Trevor. You're a debt. And I don't like debts. Trevor's face didn't just go white. It went gray. He looked at his father in the 3rd row, who was frantically checking his phone, tears streaming down his face. The realization hit the room like a physical wave. Kong Jun hadn't just crashed a wedding. He had dismantled an empire in the time it took to walk down the aisle. Ilara stood up. She wiped the tears from her face with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of mascara like war paint. She looked at Trevor, the man she thought she knew, and then at Kong Jun, the monster who had just saved her. Do it, Ilara said to the priest. Her voice was cold. Finish the ceremony. The priest's voice was a thin, wavering thread as he rushed through the final rites. He didn't ask for personal vows. He didn't ask if anyone had objections. He knew the only man who would object was currently watching his entire life dissolve on a smartphone screen in the middle of the aisle. The air in the cathedral was freezing, despite the summer heat outside. It was as if Kong Jun's soul had brought a winter of his own making into the room. By the power vested in me, the priest stammered, his eyes glued to the legal mandate Kong Jun had provided, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The silence that followed was suffocating. In a normal wedding, there would be cheering, organ music, and the rustle of silk. Here, there was only the sound of Trevor's heavy, panicked breathing. He stood paralyzed, watching the woman he had just publicly trashed become the wife of the most dangerous man in the hemisphere. Kong Jun turned to Ilara. He didn't smile. He reached out and took her hand again. His skin was warm, a sharp contrast to the ice in his eyes. He didn't wait for the kiss the bride cue. He leaned in, his lips inches from her ear. Don't look at him, he whispered. Trevor Thorne no longer exists in your world. From this moment on, you only look at me. He straightened up and faced the crowd. The guests, the elite of the city, looked like they were facing a firing squad. Kong Jun didn't acknowledge them. He grabbed Ilara's hand with a grip that was firm but not painful, a tether in a storm, and began to walk. As they passed Trevor, the ex-groom tried to reach out. Ilara, wait. This is a mistake. He's a criminal. You don't know what. Kong Jun didn't even stop. He didn't even look at Trevor. 2 men in charcoal suits, who had appeared out of the shadows of the vestibule like ghosts, stepped in front of Trevor. They didn't hit him. They simply stood there, their bulk forming an impenetrable wall. Trevor collapsed back into a pew, his face buried in his hands. He was a broken man, and the video of his cowardice was already being uploaded to every social media platform on the planet. Ilara walked beside Kong Jun, her bare feet clicking rhythmically on the marble. She felt like she was floating, detached from her own body. She saw her father standing by the exit, his face a mask of shame and terror. He reached out a hand as they approached. "Ilara, honey, I can explain the debt," he began, his voice shaking. Kong Jun stopped. He didn't release Ilara's hand. He looked at her father with a cold, clinical detachment. "You sold your daughter to a coward to cover your gambling losses," Kong Jun said. "Then you stood by while that coward humiliated her. You are no longer her father. You are a ghost." "You can't do that," her father cried. "She's my blood." "I just did," Kong Jun said. He signaled to one of his men. "Ensure Mr. Vance finds his way to the street. He is no longer welcome in any property owned by the Seoul Syndicate, including this church." The guests gasped. Kong Jun had just excommunicated the city's oldest patriarch from his own social circle. He led Ilara through the massive oak doors and into the blinding light of the afternoon. A fleet of black SUVs sat idling at the curb, their engines a low, predatory growl. The door of the lead SUV clicked shut with a sound like a vault ceiling. The interior was a cocoon of leather and tinted glass, muffling the chaotic shouts of the paparazzi left on the cathedral steps. Ilara sat as far from Kong Jun as the seat allowed, her wedding dress, a mountain of useless white silk, cramped between them. Her heart was beating so hard she felt it in her teeth. "Where are we going?" she demanded. Her voice didn't shake this time. The shock was hardening into a cold, sharp anger. "And don't give me any more of that saving you talk. You had a legal mandate signed by a magistrate ready in your pocket. You've been planning this for weeks, maybe months." Kong Jun didn't look at her. He was staring at a tablet, his fingers swiping through data streams of crashing stock prices. 32 minutes, he said. "What?" "That's how long it took for the Thorne family to lose 40% of their net worth after I entered that church," he said, finally turning to her. His eyes were unsettlingly calm. "I don't plan for months, Ilara. I plan for decades. Your father didn't just owe me money. He owed me a debt that goes back to the day your mother died." Ilara felt the air leave her lungs. "My mother died in a car accident. It was a tragedy. What does that have to do with you?" "It wasn't an accident," Kong Jun said. He tapped a command on his tablet and handed it to her. On the screen was a police report from 20 years ago, but it wasn't the one she had seen in the family archives. This one had a red stamp. Classified. Subject to syndicate clearance. Ilara scrolled through the photos. Her breath hitched. The car was mangled, yes, but the driver's side door had been cut open with a thermal torch, long before the paramedics arrived. She was targeted. "She was carrying something," Kong Jun said. "And your father was the one who told the Hallow where her car would be that night. He traded her life to settle his first gambling debt. Today, he tried to do the same to you. I simply moved faster." The car began to climb a steep, private road lined with high concrete walls topped with razor wire. They weren't going to a penthouse. They were going to a fortress. The SUV passed through 3 separate security gates, each guarded by men with submachine guns who bowed as the vehicle passed. "You didn't marry me to save me," Ilara whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You married me because I'm the only one who can access whatever it is my mother died for. I'm not a wife. I'm a key." Kong Jun leaned in close, his shadow swallowing her. The scent of his expensive cologne was a mix of cedar and something metallic. "In my world, everyone is a tool or a target, Ilara. But a key is the most valuable thing I own. I suggest you start acting like the owner of this house, because the people who killed your mother are currently watching that viral video of our wedding. They know exactly where you are now." The car stopped. The doors opened to a courtyard of black gravel and silent stone. The fortress was a brutalist masterpiece of concrete and reinforced glass, perched on a cliffside that dropped straight into the churning gray Atlantic. As Elara stepped out of the SUV, the wind whipped her veil, tearing it from her hair and sending it flying into the abyss below. She didn't watch it fall. She was staring at the front doors, massive slabs of black iron that slid open without a sound. "This isn't a home," Elara said, her voice swallowed by the roar of the ocean. "It's a prison." "A prison keeps people in," Kongjun said, walking past her toward the entrance. "A fortress keeps people out. Learn the difference, or you won't survive the week." Inside, the aesthetic changed from cold stone to lethal luxury. The floors were polished obsidian, reflecting the dim recessed lighting like a dark mirror. There were no family photos, no soft edges, no warmth. Just screens. Dozens of monitors lined the hallway, flickering with surveillance feeds from around the globe. As they entered the main hall, a woman stood waiting. She was in her late 50s, her hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to stretch the skin of her face. She wore a charcoal suit and white silk gloves. "This is Mrs. O," Kongjun said, not slowing down. "She is the only person in this building you can trust." "That includes me." Mrs. O bowed deeply, her eyes remaining fixed on the floor. "The guest wing is prepared, sir. And the perimeter has been set to level red." "Level red?" Elara asked, her heart hammering. "Because of me?" Kongjun stopped and turned to face her. The silence of the house was heavy, broken only by the hum of the servers. "Because your father is a desperate man. He didn't just sell you to Trevor. He sold the location of this house to the Hallow 10 minutes ago in exchange for a flight out of the country." Elara's world tilted. He would never. He's my father. He's a man who owes $50 million to people who skin their debtors alive," Kongjun said coldly. He gestured to one of the screens. "Look. They are already in the Treeline. They think they're coming for a bankrupt socialite. They don't realize they're walking into a slaughterhouse." Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered and turned a deep, pulsing crimson. A low-frequency alarm vibrated through the floorboards, a sound more felt than heard. "Mrs. O, take her to the vault room," Kongjun commanded. He reached into his coat and pulled out a handgun, checking the chamber with a practiced, terrifying flick of his wrist. "Wait." Elara grabbed his arm. "You're going out there? Alone?" Kongjun looked at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her eyes. For a split second, the mask of the monster slipped, revealing a flicker of something ancient and weary. "I told you, Elara. You are the key. I am the lock. If I break, the world ends for you. Now move." Mrs. O gripped Elara's elbow with surprising strength and pulled her toward a concealed door in the obsidian wall. Behind them, Elara heard the heavy thud of the front doors locking down. The concealed door hissed shut, plunging Elara into a narrow, dimly lit corridor that smelled of ozone and old paper. Mrs. O didn't speak. She moved with a haunting silent speed, her white gloves guiding Elara through a maze of reinforced steel. Above them, the floor shook. A dull, muffled explosion rattled the walls. The Hallow had reached the first gate. "They're blowing the perimeter," Elara whispered, her hand tightening around the silk of her dress. "He's going to die out there, isn't he?" Mrs. O stopped at a circular vault door that looked like it belonged in a central bank. "Mr. Soul does not die easily, madam. He has spent 15 years preparing for this specific betrayal. He didn't marry you for safety. He married you for war." The vault door whirred, heavy gears grinding as it rotated. When it swung open, Elara didn't find gold or stacks of cash. The room was a high-tech archive. Thousands of physical files lined the walls, and in the center sat a single, ancient-looking wooden desk. On top of the desk was a small, black lacquered box with a golden crane engraved on the lid. "Your mother's," Mrs. O said, stepping back to let Elara pass. "Mr. Soul recovered it from the wreckage 20 years ago. He has never opened it. He couldn't. The lock is biometric, keyed to a genetic sequence that died with her. Or so the world thought." Elara approached the desk, her legs feeling like lead. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Dust fell from the ceiling, coating the black box. She reached out, her fingers trembling. The golden crane seemed to watch her. "If I open this," Ilara asked, "what happens to him?" "If you open it," Mrs. O replied, her voice dropping to a somber tone, "the reason for his existence is fulfilled. He promised your mother he would protect the contents until you were of age. He has lived his entire life as a target just to keep this room secret. He didn't bankrupt your father out of greed, madam. He did it to force the wedding so he could finally bring you here. Into the only room the Hallow cannot penetrate." Ilara touched the lid. A thin red laser line swept across her fingertip. A soft beep echoed in the silent vault. The lock clicked. But she didn't open it. Not yet. She turned to the monitors on the vault wall. They showed the courtyard. It was a chaotic nightmare of muzzle flashes and shadows. She saw Kong Jun. He wasn't hiding. He was moving through the black gravel like a ghost, his gun a rhythmic extension of his arm. He was outnumbered 10-1, but he was winning. Then, she saw it on the screen. A man in the tree lean, holding a long-range thermal rifle. He was aiming at the back of Kong Jun's head. "He's going to be sniped." Ilara screamed, pointing at the screen. Mrs. O didn't move. She looked at the box, then at Ilara. "Then you must decide, madam. Do you open the box and find out why your mother died, or do you watch the man who kept you alive die for a secret you haven't even looked at?" Ilara's heart felt like it was going to burst. She looked at the monitor. The sniper's finger was on the trigger. She looked at the box. Ilara didn't hesitate. She didn't open the box. Instead, she lunged for the control console beneath the monitors. Her eyes scanned the chaotic array of buttons and levers until she saw a red toggle labeled Perimeter Defense, Manual. "Madam, no," Mrs. O shouted, but it was too late. Ilara slammed her palm onto the toggle. On the screen, a hidden turret beneath the eaves of the fortress whirred into life. She grabbed the joystick, her eyes locked on the thermal signature of the sniper in the tree lean. The crosshairs turned green. She squeezed the trigger. The sound of the heavy caliber rounds firing was a dull thump-thump-thump that vibrated through the vault's thick walls. On the monitor, the tree lean erupted in dirt and splinters. The sniper's thermal signature vanished. In the courtyard, Kong Jun spun around, his weapon raised, searching for the source of the cover fire. He looked toward the vault's external camera, his eyes narrowing. He knew it was her. For the first time, Ilara saw him look genuinely surprised. And then, he went back to work. With the sniper gone, Kong Jun moved with renewed savagery. He cleared the remaining Hallow mercs in a blur of calculated violence. Within minutes, the courtyard was silent, save for the crackle of a burning SUV. The vault door whirred open. Kong Jun walked in, his black coat torn at the shoulder, blood dripping from a shallow cut on his cheek. He smelled of cordite and adrenaline. He looked at the turret controls, then at Ilara, who was still shaking, her hands gripped onto the joystick. "You took a life," he said. His voice wasn't judgmental. It was heavy with a dark realization. "I saved yours," Ilara snapped, her voice high and sharp. "That makes us even for the church. Now, stop the riddles." Kong Jun walked toward the desk. He looked at the black box, then at the red laser light still hovering over the biometric sensor. "You didn't open it." "I was busy making sure my husband didn't end up with a hole in his head," Ilara said, stepping away from the console. "Now open it. Together." Kong Jun reached out. His fingers hovered over the lid. "Once this is open, Ilara, there is no going back to the woman who stood in that church this morning. You won't just be a Vance. You won't just be a soul. You will be the most hunted person on the planet." "I already am," she said. "Open it." Kong Jun flipped the lid. Inside was a single, silver ledger and a crystal vial containing a strange, shimmering blue liquid. Beneath them lay a photograph. Ilara picked up the photo. It was her mother younger, laughing in a garden, but she wasn't alone. She was standing next to a man whose face had been meticulously burned out of the image. The ledger contains the real names of every member of the Hallow, Kong Jun whispered, his eyes fixed on the silver book. Including the ones sitting in the Senate. And the vial. The vial is what? Ilara asked. The reason they killed her, Kong Jun said. It's not a drug. It's a prototype. Genetic sequencing that can bypass any digital encryption on Earth. It's the skeleton key to the world's wealth. Suddenly, the monitors in the room flickered. A new face appeared on every screen. It was Trevor. But he wasn't crying anymore. He was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, a cold, predatory smile on his face. I hope you enjoyed the fireworks, Ilara, Trevor's voice boomed through the vault speakers. Did you really think I ran because I was scared of a debt? I ran because I needed you to go to the one place I couldn't find, the vault. Thanks for opening the door for me. The vault grew cold as Trevor's face loomed on every monitor. He wasn't the trembling coward from the cathedral anymore. He looked like a man who had finally shed a restrictive skin. Behind him, the background wasn't his family home. It was a high-tech command center. You didn't think I'd leave the Vance fortune to chance, did you? Trevor sneered. Your father was a drunk, Ilara, but he was a useful drunk. He leaked the location, but I provided the mercs. I needed Kong Jun to take you to the one place my hackers couldn't reach. The Soul Fortress is built on an analog grid. I needed you to trigger the biometric sequence so I could piggyback off the signal. Kong Jun didn't look at the screens. He looked at the ceiling. He's not just watching, Kong Jun muttered. He's uploading. On the main console, a progress bar appeared. Remote data extraction. 44%. He's stealing the ledger's contents through the vault's own security link. Ilara realized, her heart plunging into her stomach. Everything her mother had died for was being sucked into Trevor's servers in real time. Stop it! Ilara screamed at the screen. Too late, darling, Trevor laughed. Once the upload hits 100%, the Hallow will have the names of every traitor in their ranks. They'll purge the weak. And I'll be the one holding the list. I'll be the kingmaker. And you'll just be a tragic casualty of a mafia shootout. Kong Jun moved. He didn't go for the keyboard. He grabbed the heavy silver ledger and slammed it onto the desk. Then, he looked at Ilara. The vial. Give it to me. Why? Because the only way to stop a digital ghost is to kill the machine, Kong Jun said. He grabbed a heavy metal paperweight and smashed the crystal vial over the vault's main server hub. The shimmering blue liquid didn't spill. It seemed to crawl. It moved like a living thing, seeping into the vents of the server, glowing with an intense, haunting light. Immediately, Trevor's image on the screen began to distort, his voice turning into a digital screech. What are you doing? Trevor yelled, his face melting into pixels. That's worth billions. It's a virus, Trevor, Kong Jun said, leaning into the camera. My wife's mother didn't create a key. She created an executioner. This liquid eats data. And since you're currently linked to our system, it's traveling up your signal right now. On the screen, Trevor's eyes went wide. He realized too late. Behind him, his own command center began to spark. Servers exploded in plumes of white smoke. The progress bar hit 88% and then plummeted to 0. I'll kill you both. Trevor's voice cracked before the monitors went pitch black. The vault plunged into total darkness. The only light came from the glowing blue residue on the server, pulsing like a dying heart. We have to move, Kong Jun said, his hand finding Ilara's in the dark. The virus didn't just kill his servers. It's triggered the fortress's self-destruct. It thinks it's being compromised. Self-destruct. Ilara gasped. You built a house that blows up? I built a house that leaves no evidence, Kong Jun replied. From deep beneath their feet, a low, tectonic groan shook the foundation. The cliffside was starting to give way. The obsidian floors were no longer level. The fortress groaned, a deep metallic scream of structural failure as the cliffside began to shear away. Dust choked the air, turning the emergency red lights into a hazy, hellish fog. Kong Jun didn't run. He moved with a terrifying, calculated urgency, dragging Alara toward the service elevator. "The main lift is dead," Alara shouted over the roar of collapsing stone. "The virus ate the logic boards." "Gravity doesn't need a logic board," Kong Jun replied. He kicked open a maintenance hatch, revealing a vertical drop with a single steel cable. He grabbed a heavy-duty carabiner from his belt. The man was a walking contingency plan. He hooked himself to the cable and wrapped his arm around Alara's waist, pulling her flush against his chest. "Hold your breath." Before she could protest, they were falling. The friction of the cable against the carabiner hissed like a serpent. Alara buried her face in his neck, the scent of gunpowder and rain the only thing keeping her from spiraling into a panic attack. They hit the bottom deck just as the vault level above them imploded, sending a shockwave that threw them toward the garage. The garage was a tomb of expensive metal. Half the floor had already vanished into the ocean below. Only one vehicle remained on solid ground, a rugged, matte black motorcycle. "The SUVs are too heavy," Kong Jun yelled, mounting the bike and pulling Alara behind him. "Wrap your arms around me. Do not let go, even if we hit the water." As the engine roared to life, the back wall of the fortress gave way. Sunlight flooded in, but it was accompanied by the sight of 3 Halo helicopters hovering just offshore. They weren't there to rescue. They were there to sanitize the site. "They're going to fire," Alara screamed. "Let them," Kong Jun growled. He didn't head for the driveway. He headed for the broken wall. He pinned the throttle, and the bike screamed as it soared over the jagged edge of the cliff. For a second, they were weightless, a bride in tattered silk and a mafia boss suspended between heaven and the Atlantic. The impact with the water was like hitting a brick wall. The cold was a physical blow, knocking the air from Alara's lungs. The weight of her wedding dress began to pull her down, the silk soaking up the ocean like a sponge. She thrashed, her vision darkening as the salt water burned her throat. Suddenly, a hand gripped the back of her dress. A blade flashed underwater, slicing through the heavy layers of lace and tulle. Kong Jun hacked away the dead weight of the gown until she was free. He kicked upward, dragging her toward the surface. They broke the water, gasping for air. 50 yards away, the Seoul fortress finally surrendered to gravity, sliding into the sea in a majestic, terrifying roar of dust and foam. Kong Jun swam toward a small, inflatable life pod that had automatically deployed from the bike's wreckage. He hauled Alara in first, then climbed in after her. They lay there, drenched and shivering, as the Halo helicopters circled the ruins like vultures. "They think we're dead," Alara whispered, her teeth chattering. "Good," Kong Jun said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "That's the only time I'm truly dangerous." The life pod drifted for 3 hours in the gray Atlantic swell before a rusted fishing trawler intercepted them. It didn't have a name on the hull, and the crew didn't speak a word. They handed Alara a rough wool blanket and a cup of bitter tea, while Kong Jun disappeared into the radio room. When he emerged, he was dressed in a simple black jumpsuit provided by the crew. The blood on his face had been wiped clean, but his expression was more haunted than before. "We aren't going back to the city," he said, staring at the distant, flickering lights of the coastline. The virus didn't just burn Trevor's servers. It alerted the ghost of Gwonju. Alara wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Is that another mafia boss? Another person who wants me as a key?" "No," Kong Jun said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He was my mentor. The man who taught me that a heart is a liability in this business. He's the one who was standing next to your mother in that scorched photograph. The man with the burned-out face." Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean water. "You knew him. You knew he was with her." "He was the one who ordered the hit," Kong Jun revealed. "And I was the one he sent to do it. 20 years ago, I was the one who chased your mother's car. I was the one with the thermal torch." The world stopped. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her throat. She looked at the man who had just saved her life, the man she had just married to escape her father's debt. He wasn't her savior. He was her mother's executioner. "Why are you telling me this now?" she hissed, her eyes burning with a new, lethal hatred. "Because the Gwonju ghost is moving," Kongjun said, ignoring her rage. "He knows the virus was triggered. He knows the key is active. He's coming to finish what I couldn't do 20 years ago. I didn't kill her, Ilara. I reached the car, I saw her face, and I saw you in the back seat, a 4-year-old girl clutching a black box. I couldn't do it. I faked her death and hid her in a safe house. But she died of her injuries 3 days later. I've spent 2 decades pretending to be the Gwonju's loyal dog just to keep you off his radar." Suddenly, the trawler's radar began to beep, a frantic, high-pitched scream. 2 high-speed signatures approaching from the north. A crewman yelled in Korean. Kongjun grabbed a heavy rifle from a locker. "They aren't Hallow. They're Gwonju's elite reapers. They don't take prisoners, and they don't care about vaults. They just want the bloodline ended." "You lied to me," Ilara whispered, standing up, the wool blanket falling to the deck. "Everything, the wedding, the penthouse, the protection. It was all just guilt?" "It was a promise," Kongjun said, stepping toward the railing as the dark shapes of 2 tactical boats crested the waves. "I told her you would live to see the truth. Now you see it. Pick up that flare gun, Ilara. If I fall, you don't jump. You fight." The first tactical boat opened fire, its heavy machine gun shredding the trawler's wooden cabin into splinters. The ultimate betrayal. Kongjun was the one who chased Ilara's mother. Can she ever trust him again, even with the Reapers closing in? Smash that like button if you didn't see that twist coming. Subscribe and comment, Reapers, to see the battle on the high seas. The past is catching up, and it's armed to the teeth. The trawler groaned under the weight of the heavy machine gun fire. Splinters of ancient wood flew like shrapnel, slicing through the air. Ilara dove behind a rusted winch, her ears ringing from the concussive force of the bullets. She looked at the flare gun in her hand, a plastic toy compared to the heavy artillery shredding the ship. "They're coming alongside," Kongjun yelled. He braced his rifle against the railing and fired. A rhythmic crack 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 answered the Reaper's aggression. On the nearest tactical boat, a man in black gear slumped over the side, but the vessel didn't slow down. It slammed into the trawler with a bone-jarring thud. Magnetic grappling hooks hissed through the air, clattering onto the deck. The Reapers weren't just here to sink the ship, they were here for a confirmation of death. They swarmed over the railing like shadows, their suppressed weapons spitting silent death. Kongjun moved with a cold, mechanical fluidity. He dropped his rifle as a Reaper lunged at him with a serrated combat knife. He caught the man's wrist, twisted it until the bones snapped with a sickening pop, and used the dying man as a human shield against a volley of gunfire. He was a monster in his natural habitat, the chaos of a killing floor. Ilara watched him, her mind a storm of conflicting impulses. This was the man who had hunted her mother, the man who had caused the very trauma he was now protecting her from. Part of her wanted to let the Reapers take him. But as a Reaper turned his weapon toward her hiding spot, the instinct to survive took over. She aimed the flare gun and pulled the trigger. The magnesium flare erupted in a blinding, crimson scream. It hit the Reaper square in the chest, igniting his tactical vest. The man became a human torch, screaming as he stumbled backward off the ship and into the dark water. Kongjun glanced at her, his eyes wide with a fleeting moment of grim approval. He finished the last man on the deck with a single shot and lunged for Ilara, pulling her toward the second tactical boat, the one the Reapers had used to board. "We're taking their ship," he shouted. "What about the crew?" Ilara cried, looking at the silent fisherman who had helped them. "They're already dead, Ilara. Look." Kongjun pointed to the radio room. The fishermen weren't cowering, they were slumped over their stations, executed with surgical precision. The Gwonju ghost left no witnesses. Ever. They jumped onto the sleek, carbon fiber boat just as the trawler's fuel tank ignited. A massive fireball lit up the night sky, casting long, jagged shadows across the waves. Kong Jun slammed the throttles forward. The tactical boat's triple engines roared, lifting the bow out of the water as they surged away from the wreckage. As the adrenaline began to fade, the silence between them became a weapon. Ilara sat on the floor of the vibrating boat, the flare gun still hot in her hand. "You didn't kill her," she whispered, staring at the back of his head. "But you're the reason she's dead. You spent 20 years watching me, waiting for the right time to use me to get to the ghost. You're not a husband, Kong Jun. You're just a more patient version of Trevor." Kong Jun didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the GPS. "Trevor wanted your money. The ghost wants your blood. I just want the cycle to end. If that makes me a villain in your story, I can live with that. But you need to know one thing. The ledger Trevor stole? It was a decoy." Ilara looked up. "What?" "The real ledger isn't a book," Kong Jun said, tapping his temple. "It was the blue liquid. The virus didn't just eat his data. It encoded the names into the only thing left in the room." "Me," Ilara realized, her blood running cold. "The liquid. It touched me." The high-speed boat cut through the dark Atlantic like a blade. Ilara stared at her hands, expecting them to glow with the same haunting blue light that had consumed the vault servers. She felt no different, but the weight of Kong Jun's words made her skin crawl. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She was a walking death sentence. "How?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "It was a liquid. It was a virus. How could it be in me?" "The blue liquid was a synthetic neural interface," Kong Jun said, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "It was designed by your mother for the Gwonju ghost. He wanted a way to store data that couldn't be hacked, couldn't be burned, and couldn't be stolen. He wanted a human hard drive. Your mother realized too late what he intended to use it for. She tried to destroy it, but she couldn't. So she refined it. She made it so it would only bond with her bloodline." Ilara felt a wave of nausea. "She put this thing in the vault, knowing I would be the one to find it?" "She knew you would be the only one who could survive it," Kong Jun corrected. "When you smashed that vial, the aerosolized particles didn't just drift. They sought out the closest compatible host. You. The data isn't in your pockets, Ilara. It's written into your synaptic pathways. Every name, every bank account, every dark secret of the Hallow and the Gwonju is currently being processed by your brain." Suddenly, Ilara's vision spiked. A flash of white light exploded behind her eyes, followed by a dizzying stream of numbers, names, and faces. She saw a senator she recognized from the news, Senator Harrison, linked to a shipping manifest for illegal munitions. She saw the ghost of Gwonju, his face finally clear. It was the man who had been the priest at her wedding. "The priest!" Ilara screamed, clutching her head as the information surged. "The man who married us. He wasn't a priest. He was the ghost." Kong Jun slammed on the brakes, the boat skidding across the water. He turned to her, his face a mask of pure horror. "What did you say?" "The man in the church," Ilara panted, her eyes wide and unfocused. "The one with the shaking hands. In the data, his biometric signature matches the man in the photo. He wasn't scared of you, Kong Jun. He was watching us. He let you take me because he knew I'd lead you to the vault. He let me bond with the data because he couldn't do it himself." Kong Jun cursed in Korean, a string of harsh, guttural sounds. He grabbed his satellite phone, but before he could dial, a red dot appeared on his chest. Then another on Ilara's forehead. They weren't alone on the ocean. A massive, silent submarine had surfaced 200 yards away, blacker than the water itself. On its deck stood the priest, his humble robes gone, replaced by a tailored military uniform. He held a tablet in one hand and a detonator in the other. "Thank you, Kong Jun," the ghost's voice crackled over the boat's radio. "You've groomed the perfect vessel. Now, Ilara, come to me. Or I press this button, and the virus in your head will trigger a massive neural surge. You won't die, but you'll never speak, think, or move again. You'll be a very pretty, very silent library for the rest of your life. Ilara collapsed to the deck of the tactical boat. Her skull felt like it was being split by a white-hot axe. The stream of data wasn't just numbers anymore. It was sensory overload. She could smell the gunpowder of 1,000 assassinations. She could hear the digital pings of $1 billion moving through offshore accounts. The priest, the ghost of Gwonju, stood on the submarine's deck, a silhouette of absolute malice. You're hurting her. Kong Jun roared into the radio. He dropped his rifle and held up his hands, stepping between Ilara and the red laser dots. You have what you want. The data is active. Let the pressure off her brain and I'll bring her to you. You have no leverage, Kong Jun. The ghost's voice echoed over the waves. You were a good dog, but even a loyal hound is put down when the hunt is over. The neural surge is at 60%. When it hits 90, her consciousness will be erased to make room for the raw data. She'll be a clean slate. My slate. Ilara's vision was a kaleidoscope of terror. Through the pain, a memory that wasn't hers surfaced, a memory from the blue liquid. She saw her mother's face, not laughing, but crying over a keyboard. She heard her mother's voice. The key isn't a lock, Ilara. It's a mirror. If they look too deep, they see themselves. Kong Jun. Ilara gasped, her fingers digging into the carbon fiber deck. The mirror. Tell him. The mirror. Kong Jun looked down at her, his eyes searching hers for a sign of sanity. He saw the blue glow beginning to leak from her tear ducts. He understood. He grabbed the boat's emergency transmitter, but instead of calling for help, he hooked it into the boat's radar array. Ghost. Kong Jun yelled into the radio. You want the data? You forgot one thing about Ilara's mother. She was a Vance by blood, but she was a hacker by soul. She didn't build a database. She built a feedback loop. The ghost's smile faltered. He looked at his tablet. The progress bar was no longer moving forward. It was moving backward. What are you doing? The ghost hissed. I'm not stopping the upload, Kong Jun said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. I'm reversing the polarity. Ilara isn't the library, you old fool. She's the broadcast tower. Everything she's seeing right now, all your secrets, are being sent to every news agency, every police precinct, and every rival syndicate in Asia. If you don't shut down your link, you'll be the most famous criminal in history in exactly 60 seconds. The red dots on Ilara's forehead flickered. On the submarine, the ghost scrambled at his tablet, his composure shattering. Kill them. Sink the boat. But his men hesitated. They were looking at their own phones. The alerts were already popping up. Global leak. The Gwonju files. The pressure in Ilara's head suddenly snapped. The white light vanished, replaced by a deep, throbbing silence. She looked up just in time to see the ghost's own men turn their weapons on him. In the world of the Mafia, a leader with no secrets is a leader with no power. The link is broken, Kong Jun whispered, pulling Ilara up. But as they watched, the submarine began to submerge. The ghost hadn't been killed. He had dove into the hatch, and the ship was disappearing beneath the black water. He's getting away, Ilara panted, clutching Kong Jun's arm. Let him go, Kong Jun said, watching the whirlpool where the sub had been. He has no empire to return to. But we have a more immediate problem. He pointed to the horizon. A dozen searchlights were cutting through the dark. The Navy was coming. And they weren't there for the ghost. They were there for the key. The Navy wasn't there to rescue them. The searchlights cutting through the mist were cold and clinical, the eyes of a government that had just seen its darkest secrets leaked to the public. To them, Ilara wasn't a victim. She was a biological hazard, a living weapon that had just destabilized the global order. They aren't going to arrest us, are they? Ilara asked, her voice hollow. The blue glow in her eyes had faded to a dull, bruised violet, But the data was still there, humming in the back of her mind like a hive of bees. They can't afford to let you stand trial, Kong Jun said, his hands moving with lightning speed over the tactical boat's controls. If you speak in a courtroom, the world collapses. They'll sink us and call it a tragic accident involving unidentified maritime terrorists. We have 4 miles of open water before we hit the international line. If we don't make it, we're just another piece of ocean floor. He slammed the throttles to the wall. The boat leaped forward, the bow clearing the water as the engines screamed at their red line. Behind them, 2 Navy interceptors, sleek, gray predators, detached from the main fleet. They were faster, heavier, and armed with 30mm cannons. The first volley of fire skipped across the water like lethal stones, throwing up plumes of spray that drenched Alara. She crawled to the rear of the boat, her fingers finding a crate of emergency smoke canisters. Kong Jun. The smoke, she yelled. Wait for my signal, he roared over the wind. I'm going to cut the engines. When I do, they'll overshoot us. That's when you blow the canisters. It was a suicide move. If the interceptors didn't overshoot, they would shred the stationary boat in seconds. Alara looked at the gray hulls closing the gap. She could see the gunners adjusting their sights. 300 yards. 200 yards. Now. Kong Jun killed the power. The boat dipped, losing its plane and slowing violently. The 2 Navy vessels, traveling at 60 knots, couldn't compensate in time. Alara pulled the pins on 4 canisters and hurled them into the wake. A wall of thick, chemical white smoke erupted, swallowing their position. The interceptors roared past them, their cannons firing blindly into the fog. In the silence that followed, Kong Jun didn't restart the main engines. He engaged a silent electric trolling motor and turned the wheel hard to the east. We're ghosts now, he whispered. But as the smoke cleared, Alara realized the danger hadn't passed. Her head began to throb again, but this time, it wasn't a leak. It was a signal. The data in her brain was reacting to something nearby. Someone is pinging me, she gasped, clutching her temples. It's not the Navy. It's Trevor. Trevor is dead, Alara. His servers exploded, Kong Jun reminded her. No, she said, her eyes flying open. He wasn't in that command center. He was on a boat. This boat. Kong Jun, look at the floorboards. Kong Jun pulled back the synthetic carpet near the fuel tank. Taped to the hull was a black box the size of a brick, with a single pulsing green light. It wasn't a bomb. It was a long-range transmitter. He didn't want the data, Alara realized, her voice trembling. He wanted to use me as a beacon to lead the Reapers and the Navy to you. He's been tracking us since we left the church. He's the reason the ghost found us. Then we give him what he wants, Kong Jun growled. He ripped the tracker off and tied it to a floating life ring. He shoved the ring into the water and restarted the engines. Let the Navy hunt a piece of plastic. We're going to find the man who put it there. The fog clung to the water like a wet sheet as the tactical boat slowed. They were approaching a derelict oil rig, a rusted iron skeleton rising from the sea. Alara's mind hummed with a different frequency now. The tracker was gone, but the data in her brain was screaming. She could feel a localized server nearby, a high-frequency heartbeat that didn't belong in the middle of the ocean. He's up there, Alara whispered, pointing at the rig. I can feel the handshake. My brain is trying to sync with his hardware. Kong Jun didn't hesitate. He brought the boat alongside one of the massive, barnacle-encrusted legs. Stay here. If the engines start, you drive. Don't look back. No, Alara said, her hand tightening on his arm. He's my debt to pay, Kong Jun. He humiliated me in front of the world. He tried to turn my mind into a hard drive. I'm going up. Kong Jun looked at her for a long second. He saw the woman from the church was gone. In her place was something forged in salt and fire. He handed her a compact 9mm pistol. One in the chamber. Don't hesitate. Trevor Thorne isn't a man anymore. He's a parasite. They climbed the rusted ladder in silence. At the top, the wind howled through the steel girders. In the center of the platform, inside a modified shipping container, they found the glow of monitors. Trevor sat there, surrounded by empty champagne bottles and high-end servers. He looked disheveled, frantic, his eyes bloodshot. Finally, Trevor shouted, spinning around. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a remote. You have no idea how hard it is to maintain a satellite uplink in a storm. Ilara, come here. I've already sold the rights to your stream. The world wants to see the living ledger. The world wants you dead, Trevor, Ilara said, her voice steady as she raised the pistol. The Hallows names are public. They know you were the one who leaked them. You aren't a kingmaker. You're a target. Trevor's face didn't go white this time. It went purple with rage. I made you. You were a bankrupt socialite. I gave you a story that got 1 billion views. You're the most famous woman on earth because of my betrayal. You didn't make me, Ilara said. She felt the data in her head surge, a wave of blue light flickering behind her retinas. You just opened the cage. Kong Jun stepped out of the shadows behind her. The Navy is 10 minutes away, Trevor. They're tracking the beacon we left on the life ring, but they'll realize the trick soon. When they get here, they won't find the key. They'll find the man who tried to blackmail the government. I have the kill switch, Trevor screamed, holding up the remote. If you don't surrender, I'll fry her brain right now. Do it, Ilara said, stepping forward. Trevor blinked. What? Do it. If you kill the data, you kill your only leverage. You'll be just another pathetic man on a rusted rig with no money and no friends. Ilara was inches from him now. Press the button, Trevor. Show me how much of a coward you really are. Trevor's finger trembled on the trigger. He looked at Kong Jun, then back at Ilara. He saw the blue glow in her eyes, a power he could never understand. He realized he had lost. He dropped the remote and fell to his knees, sobbing. Please, Trevor whimpered. Please, Kong Jun. My father. They killed him. I have nowhere to go. Kong Jun looked at Ilara. Your choice. Ilara looked at the man who had shattered her heart at the altar. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel revenge. She felt nothing. She reached down, picked up the remote, and crushed it under her boot. The Navy will be here in 5 minutes, Trevor, she said. I suggest you start swimming. The wind on the oil rig screamed louder than Trevor's sobbing. The ocean below was a churning graveyard of white foam and black water. Ilara stood over the man who had been her fiancé, feeling the cold weight of the pistol in her hand. The blue hum in her mind began to quiet, but the sonar pings of the approaching Navy vessels felt like hammers against her skull. They're 3 miles out, Kong Jun said, his eyes scanning the horizon where the searchlights were no longer scattered. They were converging. Trevor was the bait, but the rig is the trap. If we stay, we're buried here. I'm not running anymore, Ilara said, turning away from Trevor. If I run, I'm just a ghost like my mother. If they want the data, they have to face the person holding it. This isn't a movie, Ilara. Kong Jun grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight enough to bruise. There is no negotiating with a torpedo. They will erase this rig from the map just to ensure that blue liquid never reaches a rival shore. You aren't a person to them. You are a catastrophic security leak. Suddenly, the rig's internal speakers crackled to life. It wasn't the Navy. It was a voice Ilara recognized from the data surge. The Director of National Intelligence, a man whose private offshore accounts were now being tweeted by every bot on the internet thanks to her mother's mirror. Mrs. Soul. The director's voice was smooth, devoid of emotion. You have caused a great deal of digital noise. We are prepared to offer you a sanctuary. A private facility where your unique condition can be studied and stabilized. If you surrender now, Mr. Soul will be allowed to walk away. Kong Jun laughed, a dry, bitter sound. He's lying. The moment you step on that deck, they'll put a bullet in my head and a chip in yours. I know, Ilara said. She looked at the server stacks Trevor had used. She saw the cables snaking across the floor, hooked into the rig's main power grid. A plan formed in the blue-lit corners of her mind. Kongjun, can you overload the rig's gas vents? Kongjun's eyes widened. The pressure valves? It would turn the rig into a torch. We'd have seconds to hit the water. Then we better be fast, Ilara said. She knelt by the servers and began typing. Her fingers moved with a speed that felt alien, her brain dictating code she had never learned. She wasn't just deleting data, she was tethering it. She was linking the Navy's own encryption keys to the rig's self-destruct sequence. What are you doing? Trevor gasped, crawling toward her. I'm giving them a choice, Ilara said, her eyes glowing a fierce electric violet. They can sink us, or they can save their own satellites. I've uploaded a logic bomb into their tactical net. If this rig goes up while they're within a mile, their entire fleet goes dark. GPS, radar, communications, everything. The valves are open. Kongjun yelled, the sound of hissing gas now competing with the wind. The igniter is on a 30-second timer. Ilara, move. They ran for the edge. Behind them, Trevor screamed, realizing he was being left with the mess he created. Kongjun grabbed Ilara, and together they leaped into the abyss just as the first Navy flare lit up the sky. The world vanished into a roar of orange and gold. The oil rig didn't just burn, it disintegrated. The shockwave hit the water a split second after Ilara and Kongjun submerged, a massive fist of pressure that tried to crush the air from their lungs. Under the surface, the ocean was a chaotic swirl of bubbles and debris. Ilara felt the heat of the explosion even through the freezing salt water, a terrifying reminder of the power she had just unleashed. She thrashed, her vision clouded by the dark churn. Her lungs burned, a desperate physical demand for oxygen that her brain, still flooded with data, struggled to process. For a moment, she was lost, not just in the ocean, but in the stream of numbers still flickering behind her eyes. Then, a hand gripped her collar. Kongjun pulled her upward. They broke the surface 100 yards from the inferno. The rig was a skeleton of fire, lighting up the night for miles. In the distance, the Navy interceptors were dead in the water. Their lights were out, their radars silent. Ilara's logic bomb had worked. The fleet was blind, deaf, and paralyzed by the digital feedback loop. Don't stop. Kongjun gasped, his face pale in the flickering firelight. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead where a piece of debris had clipped him. The currents. We have to get away from the suction. They swam with the desperation of the damned, moving away from the sinking wreckage. After what felt like hours, they found a floating section of the rig's helipad, a flat expanse of honeycomb steel. They dragged themselves onto it, collapsing as the cold wind began to sap their remaining strength. We did it, Ilara whispered, her voice a shredded ghost of itself. It's gone. The ledger, the rig, Trevor. It's all gone. It's not gone, Ilara, Kongjun said, sitting up and looking at her. His eyes were dark, reflecting the dying embers of the fire. It's in you. The Navy will reboot. The Gwonju ghost is still out there in that submarine. You've won a battle, but you've started a war that won't end until you're dead or in a cage. Ilara sat up, the salt water stinging her eyes. She felt the data shifting again. It wasn't a surge this time, it was a settling. The mirror her mother had built wasn't just a weapon, it was a map. Deep within the encrypted layers, she felt a coordinate. Not a bank account, not a name, but a location. Jeju, she breathed. The vault in the fortress was a distraction. My mother's real work. The cure for the virus. It's in Jeju. At the old lighthouse. Kongjun froze. Jeju. That's the ghost's birthplace. If we go there, we're walking into the heart of the spider's web. He thinks he's the spider, Ilara said, her eyes glowing with a cold, steady violet light. But he doesn't realize I've already seen his shadow. I have his private codes, Kong Jun. I have his soul in my head. We aren't going there to hide. We're going there to erase him. Far off in the dark, a low hum began to grow. Not a ship, and not a plane. A drone. A single, silent eye in the sky, watching them from the clouds. The world wasn't done with them yet. The drone hummed overhead like a persistent mosquito. Kong Jun didn't look up. He knew if it was hovering, it had already painted them for a strike or a retrieval team. We have 20 minutes before the next wave hits this coordinate, he said, pulling a waterproof transponder from his boot. He cracked it, signaling a deep-sea contact he hadn't used in a decade. If we're going to Jeju, we go now. But the moment we step on that island, your life belongs to the data. You won't be Elara Vance anymore. You'll be the ghost's replacement. I'm already not Elara Vance, she replied, her voice sounding layered, as if two people were speaking at once. The mirror was integrating. She could see the world as a grid of signals, the drone's encrypted burst, the thermal heat of the sinking rig, the electrical pulse of Kong Jun's heart. The girl in the wedding dress died in the Atlantic. Let's go. A black submersible, no larger than a shark, breached the surface next to their raft. It was a cleaner vessel, unmarked and silent. They climbed inside the cramped, pressurized cabin. As the hatch sealed, the pressure change caused Elara's nose to bleed, a dark, violet-tinted liquid. The virus is rewriting your neural chemistry, Kong Jun whispered, wiping the blood with his thumb. There was a rare flicker of grief in his eyes. Your mother didn't just build a database, Elara. She built an evolution. But the human brain wasn't meant to hold this much light. I can handle it, she lied. Her mind was a roaring furnace of secrets. The trip to Jeju was a blur of high-speed underwater travel. When they surfaced, it wasn't at a pier. They rose in a hidden sea cave directly beneath the Jeju lighthouse. The walls were lined with old Japanese subpens from the war, now filled with high-end servers and tactical gear. This was the ghost's true sanctuary, the womb where the Hallow was born. As they stepped onto the wet stone dock, the lights flickered on. The ghost, the man who had played the priest, stood at the top of a metal staircase. He looked older now, his military uniform rumpled, but his eyes were wide with a frantic religious fervor. You brought it back, the ghost whispered, his voice echoing in the cave. The blueprint. My legacy. Do you feel it, Elara? The weight of every secret in the world? It's too much for one girl. It's too much for a human. It belongs to the machine. It belongs to no one, Elara said. She stepped forward, the blue light in her eyes casting long, jagged shadows against the cave walls. I've seen your childhood, ghost. I've seen the cellar in Gwonju where you started. I know why you want to control the world's secrets, because you're terrified of your own. The ghost's face contorted. He raised a remote, the same type Trevor had used, but this one was hardwired into the cave ceiling. I don't need to negotiate. The moment you entered this cave, the womb began its harvest. The servers are already pulling the data from your cortex via the neural interface. In 5 minutes, you'll be an empty shell, and I will be a god. Elara felt the pull. It was like 1,000 needles dragging her thoughts out through her eyes. She fell to her knees, the stone floor cold against her skin. Kong Jun. She gasped. Kong Jun didn't move toward her. He moved toward the ghost. I told you 20 years ago, Kong Jun said, his voice a low, lethal growl. I don't like debts. And today, the interest is due. The cave hummed with the sound of 1 billion transistors. Elara's body arched, her spine stiffening as the blue light in her eyes turned into a blinding, strobe-like flicker. The servers lining the walls groaned under the sudden influx of data. The ghost stood at the terminal, his fingers dancing across the keys, his face illuminated by the stolen secrets of 1,000 empires. It's beautiful, the ghost hissed. The encryption is folding. I can see the heart of the world. You see nothing. Kong Jun roared. He lunged up the stairs, but a hidden turret in the ceiling swiveled, pinning him down with a hail of lead. He dived behind a steel crate, the bullets sparking off the metal inches from his head. Ilara. Fight it. Don't let him take the core. Ilara couldn't speak. Her consciousness was being stretched across a digital abyss. She felt the ghost's harvest, clawing at her memories. Her mother's face, the smell of the wedding flowers, the weight of the ring Trevor had thrown. It was all being stripped away, replaced by raw, cold binary. But in the center of the storm, she felt the mirror again. It wasn't a defensive wall. It was a trapdoor. Her mother hadn't built a library for the ghost to read. She had built a virus that looked like a library. If they look too deep, her mother's voice echoed in her mind, they become the data. Ilara stopped fighting the pull. She leaned into it. She opened every mental gate, every neural pathway, and pushed. She didn't just send the data, she sent the surge. What is this? The ghost screamed. On his monitors, the bank accounts and names vanished, replaced by a single pulsing blue eye. The mirror began to reflect the ghost's own system back at him. The cave servers didn't just record the data, they began to execute it. The ghost's private accounts began to drain in real time. His satellite network began to deorbit. His own tactical drones turned toward the Jeju cave. Stop it. You're destroying everything. The ghost shrieked, slamming his fists against the console. I'm not destroying it, Ilara's voice boomed, amplified through the cave's own speakers. It was no longer human. It was a composite of 1,000 voices. I'm returning it to the source. Kong Jun saw his opening. He vaulted over the crate, ignored the turret, and tackled the ghost into the main server rack. The impact sent a surge of electricity through both men. The ghost screamed as the blue light from the servers jumped into his skin, his own neural interface, the one he had used to track Ilara, becoming a conductor for the feedback loop. Kong Jun, get back! Ilara cried, her voice finally breaking through the digital haze. The server racks began to explode in a chain reaction of blue fire. The ghost was fused to the console, his body a conduit for the mirror's final act. He wasn't dying. He was being overwritten. His mind was being replaced by the very secrets he had used to torture the world. Kong Jun scrambled back down the stairs, grabbing Ilara as the ceiling began to crack. The drone strike he had predicted was finally arriving, but it wasn't the Navy. It was the ghost's own automated defense system, triggered by the virus to sanitize the compromised location. We have to go. Now. Kong Jun hauled her toward the submersible. The ghost. Ilara looked back. The man who had haunted her life was nothing more than a glowing shadow in a room of melting glass. He's gone, Ilara. He's part of the machine now. The cave didn't collapse with a roar. It vanished into a blinding silent pulse of blue light as the mirror reached critical mass. The submersible's hatch slammed shut just as the shockwave hit, tossing the small vessel into the depths like a toy. Inside, the darkness was absolute, save for the faint, dying violet glow in Ilara's eyes. She lay on the floorboards, her head resting on Kong Jun's lap. The roar of the servers was gone. The voices of 1,000 senators and assassins had finally fallen silent. For the first time since the wedding, the world was quiet. Is it over? She whispered. Kong Jun looked down at her. The blood had been wiped from his face, but his eyes were weary, the look of a man who had finally finished a 20-year marathon. The data is gone, Ilara. When the womb exploded, the feedback loop acted as a digital black hole. It pulled every copy, every backup, and every trace of that virus into the fire. You aren't a ledger anymore. I'm just me. You're whoever you want to be, he said softly. They surfaced miles away, near a quiet, sandy cove on the southern tip of Jeju. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in bruises of orange and purple. As they waded onto the shore, Ilara looked back at the horizon. There was no smoke, no fire, just the vast, uncaring ocean. The world would wake up to a different reality. The Gwonju files were still out there in the public domain, but the key to controlling them was buried under 1,000,000 tons of seawater. The power balance of the world had shifted, but for Alara, the only thing that mattered was the weight of the sand beneath her feet. She looked at Kong Jun. He stood at the edge of the water, looking toward the mainland. "You're free of your debt," she said. "You kept your promise to my mother." "I did," he replied. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "My SUVs are gone. My fortress is at the bottom of the Atlantic. My marriage was a lie to protect a secret that no longer exists. I have nothing left but a name that people will hunt for the rest of my life." Alara walked toward him. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was cold, but his grip was steady. "Then it's a good thing I've always liked a man with a bit of mystery." She reached into the pocket of her tattered, salt-stained jacket, the one she'd taken from the boat. She pulled out the small, black lacquered box with the golden crane. It had survived the fire, the water, and the fall. "You never opened it," Kong Jun noted. "I don't need to," Alara said. She walked to the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea and, with a final, graceful motion, tossed the box into the abyss. Some secrets aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be forgotten. As the sun broke over the horizon, the two of them walked away from the shore, disappearing into the mist of the Jeju Highlands. The socialite and the monster were gone. In their place were two ghosts, ready to start a story that had nothing to do with blood, or money, or a wedding dress. 6 months later, in a small cafe in Marseille, a woman with violet-tinted eyes sits reading a newspaper. The headline mentions the mysterious disappearance of Trevor Thorne and the collapse of the Hallow Syndicate. A man in a dark coat sits across from her, placing a fresh cup of coffee on the table. "Ready to go?" he asks. She smiles, her eyes flashing with a hint of that old electric light. "Always." They made it. The mirror is shattered, the ghost is gone, and Alara and Kong Jun have started a new life. Thank you for following this wild ride from the altar to the abyss. Smash that like button one last time if you loved the ending. Subscribe for more high-stakes thrillers, and comment "finale" to let me know what you want to see next.